All right, today we are going deep. We're going to unpack the tiny, microscopic engine that turns a meal into a thought, or a step, or even a heartbeat. Yeah, we're talking about the powerhouse at the very center of your cells.
Think about it. Every single bite of food you take, whether it's an apple, a piece of steak, you name it, that has to become usable energy. And the central hub for this whole conversion, kind of like the metabolic Grand Central Station, is a process called the citric acid cycle. It's the final furnace where all our different fuels get burned for energy.
So before we get into all the nuts and bolts, let's zoom out for a second. Because really, to understand this one cycle is to understand a fundamental secret that's shared by almost all life on Earth. You know, Carl Sagan just put it perfectly. Despite this incredible, mind-boggling diversity of life on our planet, the core machinery is stunningly similar. The cycle we're exploring today, it's one of those universal blueprints, linking us all the way back to the earliest forms of life.
Okay, take a look at this. This map basically shows how all metabolic roads lead to one central hub. It doesn't matter if it's sugars, fats, or proteins, they all get broken down into pieces that feed right into the citric acid cycle. This is the main furnace in your body, where fuel gets oxidized to release energy, producing the carbon dioxide you exhale with every breath.
But here's the thing, you can't just throw anything into this metabolic furnace. Oh no, there's a price of admission. Every type of food we eat has to be converted into one specific molecule first. It's like a universal ticket just to get into the cycle.
And that ticket is a molecule called acetyl-CoA. It's the universal entry point, and it's produced from breaking down sugars, fats, and even some amino acids. You could think of it as the single currency that the citric acid cycle accepts. No ticket, no entry.
So how do we make this ticket, especially from sugar? Well, that job falls to a colossal enzyme machine, the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. And just to give you an idea of the scale here, this thing is 5 times larger than a ribosome, which is the cell's protein factory. Its whole purpose is to take pyruvate, the end product of sugar breakdown, and turn it into that precious acetyl-CoA ticket.
This complex works just like a molecular assembly line. In this multi-step process, it first clips one carbon atom off of pyruvate. That gets released as CO2. Then, it attaches the 2 carbon piece that's left over to a carrier molecule, and voila, you've got your ticket, acetyl-CoA. Now, this is crucial. It also captures high-energy electrons from this reaction, storing them in a special carrier molecule called NADH for later. And what's absolutely brilliant is how the cell regulates this whole gateway. The logic is super simple. If the cell is already swimming in energy, plenty of ATP, NADH, and acetyl-CoA, it shuts this machine down, right? Why make more fuel if the tanks are already full? But when energy is low, the complex gets the green light. It's a perfectly efficient supply and demand system. Okay, so our acetyl-CoA molecule has its ticket. It's ready to go. Let's follow it as it takes one full spin through the cycle. Here it is, the main event. Our little 2-carbon acetyl-CoA enters the cycle by merging with a 4-carbon molecule called oxaloacetate. An enzyme basically stitches them together, and that forms a 6-carbon molecule called citrate, which, as you might guess, is where the cycle gets its name.
Now, the whole point here is to harvest energy from that acetyl-CoA. So as the cycle turns, those 2 carbons we just added get systematically stripped off and released as carbon dioxide. And yep, this is the very CO2 you're breathing out right now. It's the result of oxidizing that fuel. But honestly, that's just the byproduct. Because the real prize is the energy. In 3 separate steps, the cycle strips away high-energy electrons and loads them onto special carrier molecules. This creates 3 molecules of NADH. Just think of NADH as an energy taxi, carrying all these valuable electrons to the next stage of power generation. Now, the cell also uses a second type of energy taxi. In another step, it generates 1 molecule of FAH2, which also carries high-energy electrons. Each one of these taxis is now holding on to potential energy that the cell is going to cash in on later. And finally, the cycle produces 1 molecule of GTP directly. Now, GTP is basically the same as ATP, the cell's main energy currency. So after 1 full turn, the original starting molecule is regenerated, ready to grab another acetyl-CoA and spin that wheel all over again. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The citric acid cycle isn't just about demolition. It's not just breaking things down. It's also a construction yard. The very same process that burns fuel also provides the raw materials to build other essential molecules for the cell.
So this dual role has 2 sides.
Sometimes, molecules get siphoned out of the cycle to be used as building blocks somewhere else. Other times, molecules are added in to replenish the cycle and keep it going. The key thing to remember is that this is not a closed loop. It's a dynamic hub that's constantly talking to the rest of the cell.
And the materials it produces are absolutely vital. I mean, look at this list. One intermediate becomes the neurotransmitter glutamate. Another is the starting point for making heme, the molecule that carries oxygen in your blood. Others are used to make amino acids, new glucose, or even fatty acids and cholesterol. It's an incredibly versatile and central manufacturing plant.
All right, now let's explore a few fascinating little detours that really show just how adaptable this whole central pathway can be.
So here's a key difference between us and plants. We can't turn fat into sugar, but plants and bacteria can, and they do it using a modified version called the glyoxylate cycle. It cleverly bypasses the steps where CO2 is lost, which means they don't lose any carbons. This lets a plant seed, for example, convert its stored oils into the sugar it needs to sprout and grow before it can even start photosynthesizing. Pretty neat, huh?
But what about our bodies? I mean, what happens during fasting or on a very low-carb diet when our main sugar supply starts to run low?
Well, when glucose is scarce, the liver takes the acetyl-CoA that's being generated from burning fat and converts it into something called ketone bodies. These are a fantastic alternative fuel. They can travel through the bloodstream and, this is the critical part, they can cross the blood-brain barrier to power the brain when its favorite fuel, glucose, is in short supply.
Okay, so let's zoom back out one last time just to appreciate the inescapable importance of this single, elegant cycle.
When you get right down to it, all roads lead here. It doesn't matter what you eat, its components are eventually channeled into acetyl-CoA to feed this single central pathway. The citric acid cycle really is the great unifier of our metabolism, the final destination for burning nearly all the fuel that keeps us alive.
So this one cycle connects the food on our plate to the energy in our cells and to the very building blocks that make up our bodies. It truly is the cycle of life. Which leaves us with a final question. Given its absolutely central role, what other crucial processes in both health and disease is this ancient pathway quietly controlling?